Hello, and welcome to the Serial Talker Podcast. I'm your host, Peter Von Gomm. In today's podcast, we're going to deep dive into the macabre chronology of one of the most sensational and high-profile murders and murder sprees in recent history. The killing of fashion king Gianni Versace nearly 25 years ago in 1997. As sad as any murder is, this tale is especially so, considering the multiple other murders across the U.S. and horrific timeline that culminated in a final act of an almost mob-style killing of one of the world's most iconic fashion designers. It was a hot and typically balmy morning, July 15th in Miami Beach, 1997. And internationally revered fashion icon Gianni Versace was schmoozing with the manager at News Cafe, a buzzy Ocean Drive restaurant, walking distance from his palatial residence. He bought his usual coffee, exchanged greetings with the staff, scooped up issues of Vogue, People, and The New Yorker. What else would you expect a fashion magnate to read? And headed back to Casa Casuarina, the opulent Mediterranean revival he'd spent millions acquiring and renovating. It was modest, only 8 bedrooms, 2 kitchens, 3 sitting rooms, a bar where he entertained supermodels and global celebrities, 10 bathrooms. Supermodels need their space, a library, and 4 living rooms. Because he could. He had it rough. He purchased the home in 1992 and loved the area so much, he decided to purchase the hotel next to it and had it demolished in order to create a space for his garden, commissioning Sir Roy Strong, an English art historian and landscape master architect. Although he only paid roughly $3 million for the home, he spent an astonishing $32 million on renovations, which included, in addition to the lavish garden, a pool Tiberius would kill for, replete with 24-karat gold tiles, and a new south wing to Casa Casuarina. 50-year-old Gianni Versace knew how to live. At the helm of a fashion empire, he had the means to get anything he wanted. He was the unofficial mayor of South Beach, until the day he died, at the hands of an obsessed madman who had just been added to the FBI's 10 most wanted list. 25 years ago, South Beach, Florida, was not a place that catered to early risers. It was a beach cavorting, nightclub dancing, hedonistic scene ruled by a fashion crowd of models, musicians, actors, and bohemians. But within this indolent world, there were driven, ambitious people, and none more so than the designer known simply as Versace. On December 2nd, 1946, Gianni Versace was born in Reggio Calabria, the tip of Italy's boot, the son of an appliance salesman and the village seamstress. He wasn't much interested in classroom instruction. The place he wanted to be was his mother's workshop, where Franca Versace made beautiful wedding dresses for the brides of their community. "Why don't you go out and play with your friends?" Franca encouraged Gianni. He responded, "I don't want to. I want you to show me how you make the clothes." By his mid-30s, Versace was in Milan, the hot new epicenter of fashion, earning 6 figures a year as a designer. His first collection was shown in March 1978 at the Permanente, a contemporary art museum. He became the darling of Milan with his provocative clothes, igniting a bitter rivalry with Giorgio Armani. The saying went, Armani dresses the wife, Versace dresses the mistress. Not only was he a brilliant designer, he was a brilliant marketer. He was the first to bring the celebrities into the front rows. He was the first to use actresses and rock stars in his advertising campaigns. He understood the importance of getting his name and his image out there on a global level. Versace became one of the most famous designers of the era and is credited with creating the phenomenon of the supermodel. He made stars of Linda Evangelista, Christy Turlington, and his runway show favorite, Naomi Campbell. Even more than that, His aesthetic offered a refreshing contrast to the architectural simplicity of his predecessors. Versace designs were vibrant, sultry, and fun. He impressed that the whole idea of getting dressed is not so much to cover yourself, but is about being attractive. He felt you should dress to attract attention. He also had a knack for discovering and nurturing raw talent. The women chosen by Versace weren't just regarded as vehicles for modeling his clothes, they became part of his world. Sitting on top of a high-stakes empire which he ran with sister Donatella and brother Santo, Versace needed a place where he could retreat and relax. And on a trip to Miami Beach's South Beach in 1991, he found his haven, a 1930s Mediterranean mansion. 1116 Ocean Drive became his grotto. He felt the mood was very special there, a vibe he hadn't found anyplace else in the world. The Versace world was a place that everyone wanted to be a part of, and apparently an obsessed and violent Andrew Cunanan did too. Ever since he committed his string of horrific murders, the life of Andrew Cunanan has been under a microscope. He did not seem destined for criminal infamy. Cunanan came from a middle-class San Diego family. His father was a Philippines-born stockbroker of varying success, and his mother an Italian-American homemaker. Cunanan's school days at the elite Bishop School in La Jolla from 1981 to 87 may have been the most formative. His parents struggled to pay the private school's tuition, mortgaging their home so their youngest child could attend. Cunanan hid his true background from his classmates and hinted that he came from privilege, even royalty. He made no secret about being gay while in high school and cultivated an outrageous, carefree persona of a rich bad boy. The private school strove to be nurturing, but it seemed to only intensify Andrew's underlying anger and already well-developed penchant for pretending to be someone he wasn't. His father, he said, was a Filipino general close to ousted dictator Ferdinand Marcos, as well as a bisexual with a young lover, whom Andrew resented. Another story was that his father was a Navy veteran and a stockbroker from nearby Rancho Bernardo. However, as a lawsuit filed by his wife alleges, he had been accused of embezzling more than $100,000 and abandoned his wife and their 4 children in 1988. Cunanan once boasted that he had a pilot's license and that a Filipino senator engaged him occasionally to fly him around in an aging prop plane. Despite Cunanan's reportedly high IQ of 147, statistically higher than 99.9% of the population, his grades weren't stellar. After graduating, he enrolled at the University of California, San Diego, but quickly dropped out and began befriending rich older men to pay for his rent, clothes, travel expenses, and addictions. He reportedly became addicted to drugs, cocaine and meth, and sadomasochistic porn. His mother referred to him as a high-priced gay gigolo. De Silva. Andrew De Silva. Cunanan was always known as De Silva in San Diego and was blessed with a bounding gift to gab, and the big spender with the loud look-at-me laugh. To his inner circle in the San Diego gay scene, Cunanan's father was an Israeli millionaire. At other times, he was a Fifth Avenue aristocrat. He never told the truth, including the story of his mother sharing a spa with Debbie Harry, Blondie, as her son liked to relate. Despite their misgivings, Cunanan's friends indulged him in his stories, brushing him off as an amusing raconteur who insisted on picking up every tab and tipping very generously. He could afford it. After all, he was dating a much older multi-millionaire. Enter Norman Blockford, a wealthy 60-something sugar daddy that gave him $2,500 a month allowance, a slick new Infiniti to cruise around in, and the security that Cunanan needed. They took trips together to Paris, to the south of France, and would fly to New York for Broadway plays. Wealthy Blockford was a member of Gamma Mu, an extremely private fraternity of about 700 very rich, mostly Republican, and often closeted gay men, which twice a year sponsors posh fly-ins to cities around the world. At a particular Gamma Mu Washington, D.C. fly-in, members were treated to a private party in the Capitol Rotunda and a brunch on the roof of the Kennedy Center. The annual Starlight Ball in D.C. attracts hundreds of the highest echelon of closeted Washington. Through Blockford, Cunanan, as Andrew De Silva, briefly became a Gamma Mu member, and his contacts in the group afforded him access to a storehouse of privileged information. Reportedly, some members were alerted by the FBI to be on the lookout for Cunanan, who was in a position, it was feared, to blackmail them. On one overseas trip, a fellow Gamma Mu member from L.A. shared a house with Cunanan in Blockford in the south of France. Larry Chrysler reports that Cunanan told him he was descended from Sephardic Jews and spent his time lying by the pool, underlying passages in books, dining at the finest restaurants, and soaking up information like a sponge. Chrysler says Cunanan had an opinion on everything and found him fascinating, but full of BS. On one occasion during the trip, Cunanan came back from an outing to a nearby French village with a tiny jar of jam that cost more than $20. The wealthy Chrysler thought that he was mad dropping that kind of coin on such a small item. Cunanan responding, "I never look at any price. My family never looks at any price." On their way back from France, they spent several days in the Hamptons as guests of a wealthy gay couple. They lived the high life, attending dinner parties with well-to-dos. Cunanan charmed his older companions, telling them outlandish stories that made them raise their eyebrows, that he had once been married to a Jewish woman, and that his father-in-law was the head of the Mossad. It seems this lengthy period of time together on the road, coupled with Cunanan's shenanigans and poetic BS, was more than Sugar Papa Norm Blockford could take, and soon after, he issued Andrew his walking papers. Cunanan was dumbfounded that he would let him go. Heartbroken, broke, and nothing going on for him career-wise, Andrew headed for San Francisco, where he stayed with a friend named David Madsen. He and Madsen had had a romantic relationship the year prior, while Cunanan was secretly living with Blockford. They had met at a gay club and sparks flew. They experimented with sadomasochism, something they were both very into. But Madsen began to distance himself from Cunanan, finding him untrustworthy, oftentimes vanishing without contact for long periods of time. Madsen began to cool their romance, and now that Madsen had made clear that their friendship was platonic, he allowed Cunanan to stay with him at his apartment, temporarily until he got on his feet. Andrew decided he was going to move to San Francisco permanently and went back to San Diego for a farewell dinner with friends. Meanwhile, a mutual friend of Cunanan and Madsen, Jeff Trail, enters the fray. Trail and Cunanan had met years earlier and became close friends, occasionally Trail taking Cunanan out to shooting ranges. Trail was a Gulf War vet and worked for the California Highway Patrol in San Diego. He and Cunanan had had a falling out after Trail backed out of doing business together. Trail knew about Andrew's ways and shady dealings. Cunanan had dealt drugs at parties and clubs before and didn't want any part of it. Incensed at Trail refusing to work together, Cunanan threw Trail under the bus, telling Madsen slanderously that Trail was mixed up in the drug trade with him and had been forced to quit the CHP and flee California due to an impending investigation. Police later saying they know of no such investigation ever being instigated. Trail took a job in Minneapolis, working for a gas company, and when David Madsen also relocated to the city, Cunanan introduced the two, and they became friends. Cunanan had told a friend that he was feeling left out, having the two people he cared most about living in the same faraway city without him. Cunanan may have been jealous or suspicious that Madsen and Trail were gossiping about him behind his back. He may also have been angry at Trail for refusing to work with him. At Cunanan's farewell dinner in San Diego on April 23, 1997, before moving to San Francisco, Cunanan told his friends he had some unfinished business to take care of with Jeff Trail. He also said that he was going to start a business making prefab movie sets with a friend named Duke Miglin in Chicago. Miglin, remember that name. Nobody would have guessed, based on what they talked about that night, that he had bought a one-way ticket to Minneapolis. The last thing in the world Jeff Trail or David Madsen wanted was a visit from Andrew Cunanan. Trail had made it clear that he wouldn't be around much the weekend of Andrew's visit, as it was his boyfriend John Hackett's 21st birthday, and they had plans. On April 25th, David Madsen dutifully picked up Cunanan at the Minneapolis airport. At dinner with several of his friends from work that night, Madsen appeared uncomfortable after Cunanan asked Madsen, "Show him what I got you." He had bought Madsen a gold Cartier watch as a thank you for helping turn his life around after staying with him in San Francisco. During dinner, Cunanan, who mentioned that he planned to return to California Monday morning, was up to his old tricks to impress new people. He mentioned the Rolls-Royce he had driven around in as a kid, and the movie set business came up again. Cunanan presumably spent Friday night at Madsen's apartment, and then Saturday at Jeff Trail's pad in nearby Bloomington. Sunday afternoon, Trail told his boyfriend Hackett that he needed to talk to Andrew about something pretty important, which wouldn't take long. When Hackett arrived at Trail's apartment at 6 p.m., there was no sign of Cunanan or his bags. At about 8 o'clock, though, Cunanan left a voice message for Trail, giving Madsen's number and saying, "Give me a call because I'd like to see you." Later at Madsen's apartment, the loft's intercom shows that someone, presumably Trail, was admitted to Madsen's apartment at 9:45 p.m. A neighbor recalled hearing shouting and somebody saying, "Get the fuck out," followed by shaking and thumping against the wall for nearly a minute, then water running. He looked out his door, but saw no one. The next day, another neighbor saw Madsen in the elevator with a man matching Cunanan's description. And on Tuesday, yet another neighbor saw the two men walking Prince, Madsen's Dalmatian. Meanwhile, since Trail had vanished and wasn't returning any calls, his boyfriend John Hackett was beside himself with worry. Monday night, about 8, Hackett returned to Trail's apartment to find it just as he had left it. Police later saying an upstairs neighbor had seen a man matching the description of Cunanan in front of the apartment and heard voices talking between 7 and 7:45 p.m. on Sunday the night before. This would add up. Cunanan came to Trail's place, and then the two went together to Madsen's for a talk. It was now Tuesday afternoon, and two co-workers of David Madsen's were concerned, as he had missed 2 days of work and couldn't be reached. They showed up at his apartment and knocked on the door. Prince, the Dalmatian, was barking and scratching at the door. They decided to call the police as their concerns grew. After discussing with the police, who informed them that if they entered and the dog acted aggressively, they'd have to shoot it, they decided to hold off. They instead left a note for the building superintendent, asking her to make a welfare check on Madsen. When the superintendent entered the apartment, she made the most horrific discovery: a body wrapped in a carpet. Blood was splattered all over the back of the door, and there were 2 sets of bloody footprints on the floor. Madsen's wallet and a bloody T-shirt had been left behind, and, presumably, the murder weapon, a bloody household claw hammer, was on the table by the door. Whose body was it? It was assumed that the body belonged to David Madsen, as it was his apartment, and at that stage the pieces of the puzzle had not yet been assembled. It would take until the following morning to identify the body in the rug. Although his wallet with his ID and picture was on him, his face was badly beaten. It was the tattoo of the cartoon figure Marvin the Martian on his left ankle that proved it was Jeff Trail. Trail had been attacked from behind, and his face had been bludgeoned multiple times with a hammer. His Swiss Army watch had stopped at 9:55 p.m. Cunanan and Madsen had vanished. To the horrified disbelief of all who knew him, Madsen immediately went from being the supposed victim to being a suspect for the murder of Jeff Trail. The Minneapolis police assumed it was Madsen. It's his apartment, there's a body in there, there's no way to pin it on Cunanan. The hunt was on. Between Tuesday and Friday, Madsen's red Jeep Cherokee was spotted on Interstate 35, headed north. On Friday afternoon, Cunanan and Madsen ate at a diner near Rush Lake in Chisago County, about an hour's drive north of the Twin Cities. It was the morning of Saturday, May 3rd. Two fishermen at Rush Lake were navigating their way through tall reeds along the edge of the lake and stumbled upon David Madsen's bullet-riddled body. He had been shot 3 times, one through the eye and in the head and back. A .40 caliber Golden Saber bullet was found in his chest. His car keys were on the ground, but his Jeep was gone. According to an investigator, Madsen's body showed no sign of restraints, and his only defensive wounds were in his fingers. Possibly, he raised his hands to deflect a shot to the face. Further sleuthing at Madsen's apartment uncovered evidence to corroborate S&M activity, a pair of handcuffs. It was well known that Madsen was involved in sadomasochism, and so was Cunanan, and that it had gone on for a very long period of time. Nevertheless, nationwide attention began focusing on Cunanan only after the next killing in Chicago. Meanwhile, back at Trail's apartment, a box of ammunition was found in his closet that matched the .40 caliber bullets Madsen was shot with. Another box of the same bullets, with 10 missing, and an empty holster were also found in a duffel bag in Madsen's apartment. On the handle of the bag was an ID tag. When they revealed it, there was a break in the case they so desperately needed. The tag read, Andrew Cunanan. Next stop, Chicago. Remember the name Miglin, Duke Miglin? The guy Cunanan reportedly told friends in California he was going to do business with making movie sets? Now, it's highly unlikely that it's a coincidence of family names, but Cunanan found himself in Chicago at Lee Miglin's house. Miglin was a real estate tycoon in the Chicago area. He and his wife Marilyn were well-known, well-to-do doers and movers in the city. Their son is Duke Miglin. Lee Miglin and his wife Marilyn, who founded a cosmetics company and became a home shopping network celebrity, were much loved in Chicago. Philanthropic, caring, the son of a Lithuanian coal miner in southern Illinois, Miglin rose from selling pancake mix out of the trunk of his car to become, along with his partner, the developer of some of the biggest buildings on the Chicago skyline. On his own, he developed much of the commercial area at O'Hare Airport. His wife Marilyn has a street named after her on Chicago's near north side, Marilyn Miglin Way. On that street, her boutique faces Gianni Versace's. It was Sunday, May 4th. Marilyn had been out of town, and when Lee Miglin didn't come to the airport to pick her up, she went home to find a door open and what looked like a gun in the bathroom. She called the police. There had been no forced entry into Miglin's Gold Coast townhouse. Cunanan's callousness had become extreme. Lee Miglin's body was discovered by police under a car in his garage. The murder was brutal and had grisly, ritualistic overtones. Miglin's hands and feet were bound, and his body was partially wrapped in plastic, brown paper, and tape. His face was taped except for 2 air holes at the nostrils. His ribs had been broken, and he had been tortured with 4 stabs in the chest, probably with garden shears. His throat had been cut open with a garden bow saw. However, the autopsy revealed no sexual molestation. Whoever had done this, and I think we know who did, had slept in Miglin's bed, left a half-eaten ham sandwich in the library, bathed in the sunken bathtub, and shaved in the white marble bathroom, leaving beard stubble on the floor and in the sink. What a cheeky bastard. There also was a toy gun displayed on the sink, almost as if to taunt the police. The dog, a Labrador named Honey, which had been there the whole time, was calm and unharmed. Thousands in cash, and oddly, several of Miglin's suits were missing, as was Miglin's sporty green Lexus. The police were eager to interview Duke Miglin. He and the family said with absolute certainty neither Duke nor anyone in the family knew Cunanan, and had no idea how Duke's name surfaced. The police played hardball and insisted he tell them if he had ever had a homosexual relationship or a secret life. He told them unequivocally he's not gay and he has had no gay relationship. Soon after, in a San Francisco Examiner article on the killings, another disturbing detail surfaced. An accountant friend of Cunanan's reported that Cunanan had told him about his thrill of sadomasochistic sex and that he was into latex and face masks with just the nostrils exposed. Could Lee Miglin's murder have been completely random, as his family maintains? Why would Cunanan go to Chicago, find Miglin, and torture him without some motive? He probably wouldn't. It's highly probable that he knew Miglin. Would Miglin let some stranger in off the street? Probably no. Either Cunanan knew of the guy or knew his son. The idea that he just picked him at random, stalked him and tortured him, and then killed him is bizarre and not the most likely scenario. 2 days later, Chicago police found Madsen's Jeep illegally parked just around the corner from Miglin's house. In it were newspaper clippings about trails and Madsen's killings. By that time, Cunanan was presumed to be the driver of Miglin's green Lexus, and far, far away. Friday evening, May 9th. Victim number 4. Cunanan was at a crossroads. He needed to ditch Miglin's Lexus, as he knew by now the authorities must know he took the car and was on a nationwide registry for fugitives. He exited a highway near Finns Point National Cemetery in Pennsville, New Jersey. Driving along some back roads, he spotted 45-year-old William Reese, a groundskeeper for the historic Civil War site. Reese cared for the grounds, a remote historic site where Confederate prisoners were held during the Civil War. When always punctual Reese didn't come home from work on time, his wife drove from their home in Bridgeton, New Jersey to check on him. When she arrived at the cemetery, she saw a dark green Lexus, but no sign of her husband's bright red late-model Chevy truck. The door to the caretaker's office was open, and a radio was playing. She called the police. When the police began their search, they found Reese in a pool of blood on the concrete floor of the basement. He'd been shot once in the head with a .40 caliber bullet, which later proved to have come from the same gun that killed Madsen. Reese is considered by clinicians who study serial killers a functional homicide. Unlike the other victims, Reese was probably murdered simply for his vehicle. Trail, Madsen, and Miglin, however, carried the personal signature of what criminologists call a pathological, sadistic sexual offender. Soon, details of Cunanan's whereabouts for the 2 months following Reese's murder on May 9th began to emerge. Since May 12th, he had been living under an assumed name in a low-rent, pink-stucco North Beach residence hotel, the Normandy Plaza, where he paid about $36 a day for a series of rooms. Cunanan had paid in cash and had reportedly never brought anyone to his room. The night manager at the hotel said that Cunanan frequently changed his appearance. Sometimes his hair would be jet black, other times almost white, sometimes curly, sometimes straight. It's thought that he kept a variety of wigs. While at the Normandy Plaza, which is about 4 miles north of Versace's house, Cunanan continued his practice of buying books and porno magazines. His meals were no longer from glitzy dining establishments, but most often came from a nearby pizza joint. He still went out every night, all night, dressed to the nines, frequenting Boardwalk, a North Beach gay hustler bar, where young men go on the block to strip for older patrons' tips. Cunanan also patronized Twist, a very upscale gay bar, a few blocks from Versace's mansion. Next door to Twist is the 11th Street Diner, a 24-hour eatery, where the who's who, including Versace, mixed. It's also a favorite gathering spot for South Beach cops and politicians. The Miami Beach Police Department is right across the street. Andrew Cunanan was seen in the diner too, right under the authorities' noses. When Versace arrived in town on Thursday, July 10th, Cunanan was waiting. To friends, Cunanan often dropped Versace's name, and it appears the two had met in the past. One night in October of 1990 at a San Francisco gay club called Colossus, Versace and Cunanan apparently crossed paths. Versace was in town because he had designed costumes for the San Francisco Opera. According to an eyewitness, Versace seemed to recognize Cunanan. "I know you," Versace said, wagging a finger in the face of 21-year-old Cunanan. "Lago di Como, no? Lake Como, right?" And Cunanan replied smugly, "Thank you for remembering, Signor Versace." It's unknown exactly if there really was anything to remember, or that Andrew Cunanan had ever been near Versace's house on Lake Como. Later, to a new acquaintance at the club, Cunanan, still gushing over his Versace encounter, boasted about the exchange, quipping, "Well, if you're Gianni Versace, then I'm Coco Chanel." Additionally, a close friend of Cunanan's recalled clearly seeing Cunanan with Versace in a limousine while Versace was in town, stating that while he was walking on Market Street on his way to another gay dance club, a big white chauffeured car pulled up alongside him. Inside, he claims, were a very well-known San Francisco socialite, Cunanan, and Versace. It was 1997. And Versace was looking for a little downtime. He had just wrapped up a wildly successful showing in Paris of his fall 1997 collection, with his crown jewel Naomi Campbell front and center. There was also the Italy-America Chamber of Commerce event, slated to honor him as its Citizen of the Year in November. So he had come back to his Florida mansion to relax with his partner of 11 years, Antonio D'Amico. On July 15th, at around 8:30 a.m., Versace took a stroll, as he often did, to the News Cafe, located about 10 minutes walk south at 800 Ocean Drive. Simply clad in a white t-shirt, black shorts, and sandals, Versace strolled down the street. It wasn't unusual for the locals to see their world-famous neighbor and unofficial mayor of South Beach out and about, enjoying their community. Meanwhile, Cunanan was milling around in the vicinity of Casa Casuarina, patiently, nervously, waiting for his target to arrive home. It's assumed Cunanan watched Versace leave for his morning stroll to the neighborhood cafe. Versace arrived home, coffee in one hand, and a handful of magazines under his arm. He started opening the gates into his oasis. He hadn't been gone long. It was still before 9 a.m., and D'Amico was just inside, sipping coffee on the veranda near the entrance. Cunanan must have felt an immense rush of adrenaline as his prey was within reach, like a big cat must feel lying in wait for the right moment to pounce. Before Versace could step inside, Cunanan came out of nowhere and bound up the 5 stone steps behind Versace. He was dressed nondescript in a gray t-shirt, black shorts, and white hat, and carrying a backpack with a .40 caliber handgun, the one he had stolen from Jeff Trail, and with which he murdered David Madsen and William Reese. Without a moment's hesitation, He fired 2 bullets in quick succession at point-blank range into the back of the head of Gianni Versace. The global fashion icon collapsed to the steps. Cunanan then turned around and casually walked away, briskly at first, and then he ran. He cut left into an alley, then right down another alley, where he was captured on a hotel's security camera. That alley was directly across 13th Street from a $4 a day municipal parking lot, where witnesses reported seeing the killer enter and apparently change clothes beside a late-model red Chevy pickup truck, which proved to be the one that had been stolen from William Reese, the groundskeeper of the Civil War Cemetery. It was fitted with stolen South Carolina license plates. Suddenly, it was as if time stood still in sunny Miami Beach. Eyewitness Eddie Bianchi was at a shop nearby and ran toward the direction of the shots. It was too late to help. According to Bianchi, blood was coming out like crazy, pooling around Versace. He shook a little and then stopped moving completely. Inside the gates, an ominous feeling immediately came over D'Amico, feeling as though his blood had turned to ice. He and their butler jumped up. The house had stained glass windows, so they couldn't see what had happened from inside. They had to open the gate. When they opened the door, it was a horror show. Versace was lying crumpled on the marble steps. For D'Amico, everything went dark and was pulled away back inside the mansion. Versace was quickly transported to the trauma center at Jackson Memorial Hospital, 7 miles away, but by 9:15 a.m., he was pronounced dead at the age of 50. While the police combed the Miami area, Versace's shattered siblings, Donatella and Santo, flew in from Milan. Donatella vowing to reporters they would carry the torch of the company for Gianni Versace, that she wouldn't let a nobody kill her brother twice. They claimed his body and returned to Italy, where on July 22nd, 1 week after his murder, Versace was given a funeral fit for a king at the Duomo, Milan's soaring 14th century cathedral. Camera crews jockeyed for space outside, and more than 2,000 people filed into the memorial, many of them wearing Versace. Naomi Campbell, his favorite model, Princess Diana, his most famous client, Elton John and Sting, his closest celebrity friends, closed the service with an emotional rendition of "The Lord is My Shepherd." As the song concluded, the sounds of weeping echoed throughout the cathedral. Andrew Cunanan's whereabouts were unknown. The deadly spree culminating with Versace had landed Cunanan a spot as one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives. A feather in his cap? Sightings came in to authorities from all over the country until 8 days later after the killing of Versace. On the morning of July 23rd, less than 3 miles north of Versace's mansion, a caretaker checking on an unoccupied Miami houseboat anchored off Collins Avenue discovered someone inside when he opened the front door. A single shot rang out with a deafening echo. He bolted from the houseboat and immediately notified police, who moved in with a SWAT team. They tried to make communication with the intruder, but were getting nowhere and decided to lob tear gas into the houseboat. After 12 hours, the police announced that they had found a body inside one of the rooms and positively identified him as Andrew Cunanan. They said that he had shot himself in the mouth and left no suicide note. By staying behind in Miami after Versace's murder, Cunanan had broken his usual pattern of stealing a new getaway car and leaving a vehicle tied to a previous killing behind. Later, the FBI revealed that within 2 days of Versace's murder, Cunanan had contacted an associate on the West Coast, asking for help in obtaining a false passport to leave the country. Cunanan's suicide brought an end to a nationwide manhunt, but it marked the beginning of nearly 25 years searching for answers to why. One of the most striking aspects of Andrew Cunanan's life is that while he was interested in fashion, art, literature, and travel, he never in his life tried to work in a career that would put him in those worlds legitimately. His dead body was found next to a stack of magazines covering all those topics, including a copy of Vogue featuring Gianni Versace. He was, in this respect, the opposite of Gianni Versace. There is conjecture, there are theories as to why, but in the end, no one knows for certain if these two vastly different men did cross paths before July 15, 1997, or why Cunanan singled Versace out for death that day. Was it decided Versace would be the final act in this spree, or was it circumstance that ended it? What about David Madsen and Jeff Trail? His murder spree began with Field. It can be assumed Madsen was eliminated because he was a witness. But wouldn't Madsen try to escape? One Chicago police captain of the Behavioral Sciences Unit says no, saying it's not surprising David Madsen stayed with him and that he sat with the body for 2 days. David, thinking this guy's got power over me, I can't leave. The killing itself shows how powerful he is. It's to a degree the Stockholm Syndrome. These sexually sadistic offenders have that ability to control people. Not necessarily physical control, but many times it's just out of fear. The killing of William Reese is, for lack of a better word, understandable. He needed a fresh set of wheels, and in true serial killer fashion, without any sense of guilt, eliminated him. The most mysterious of the 5 murders, however, is the bizarre torture and murder of the wealthy Lee Miglin. This has continued to stump investigators for now more than 2 decades. Considering his wealth and the secrecy of the Gamma Mu Society members, perhaps Miglin kept a space deep in the closet, secretly held a Gamma Mu membership, and met Cunanan through those parties. That, or his son Duke, simply isn't sharing all he knows. It's simply an unsolved mystery, the sordid, lost, and destructive enigma. That is Andrew Cunanan. There has since been considerable criticism of the FBI that they weren't more familiar with the gay world of South Florida. Andrew Cunanan would never have been able to live freely there for 2 months. A nationwide manhunt that purportedly cost millions yielded little result. Today, the Versace empire, still privately owned by the family, is valued at more than $1.7 billion. Donatella at the helm. Thanks everybody. It has been a pleasure, as always, bringing you these weekly Serial Talker podcasts. If you like this kind of podcast, please consider subscribing to the channel. If you'd like to help support the production costs, you could always buy me a cup of coffee. That helps to pay for our web and podcast hosting, and those details are in the description of this podcast. If you have a compelling story you would like me to consider reading, please send it on. Those details are also in the description. And finally, if you have a friend or two who you think would like the Serial Talker podcast, why not share? Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you next week. Ciao for now.